Hi, everyone. My name is Nalidi Saul. I'm the Director of the Office of Career and Professional Development at the University of California, San Francisco. And I'd like to welcome you to our first career conversation in an age of COVID. These are short conversations that we in the office, the career professional development staff in the office are having based on the things that we're seeing with students and postdocs. And we thought we would just kind of record what we were talking about and sort of send it out to you so you have a sense of what career and professional development issues we're sort of seeing during this time, as well as what we've been advising and best practices we've been hearing about that we've been sharing with students and postdocs. So today's conversation is about hiring freezes, rescinded offers, and uncertainty. And students and postdocs have just been trying to ask a little bit about what to do now. So with that, I'd like to actually sort of turn first to Michael Matrona, who is our Associate Director of the Office of Career and Professional Development, for an overview of what he's been sort of seeing in the non-academic career market.
Thank you, Nalidi. Yes, so anecdotally, what I've been hearing from postdocs and students who have been coming to one-on-one counseling is that interviews are still going on. And I feel that many of these are from hiring decisions and hiring commitments that companies have made before this all happened. So they're following through on the positions that they're wanting to fill and actively interviewing for them as we manage through this crisis. But the other thing that I've been watching at least is a public site that's of publicly sourced or crowdsourced information. It's on a site called Candor. And what that's been doing is people from around the country have been reporting on their own companies, whether they're being hiring freezes or whether they're still actively hiring. And in some cases, many of the companies themselves have confirmed or denied some of these reports. So it's been a helpful site to watch to see who is still hiring. And from what I've seen, many of the larger pharmaceutical and biotech companies are still actively hiring and recruiting.
Got it. And actually, Linda Louie, who is our program director around experiential learning and employer engagement, can you talk a little bit about what you've been seeing around internships?
Sure. So when I talked to employers in industry over the last week or so, they wanted trainees to know, first of all, that they're very optimistic about the hiring picture right now overall. But I think internships are one place where we are seeing a disruption in hiring, at least in the short term, lab-based internships specifically. So because summer internships are coming at a time when a lot of companies are going to be sheltering in place, those internships are the one place, I would say, where we're seeing some disruptions in hiring or hiring freezes or even potentially rescinded offers. But all of the companies that I spoke to who were considering an internship freeze were very clear that they are planning to restart those internships next year. It's not going to be a long-term thing for them. And the other thing that they wanted trainees to know was that there are internships in other functional areas that are still hiring and onboarding throughout the shelter in place. So if lab-based internships are not available, they would recommend looking at internships in functional areas like computational areas or business-related internships. It's a good time to do some career exploration if that's of interest.
Got it. And Lawrence Clement, who is our program director around academic career paths, what are you seeing? Because I know that you've been having quite a number of counseling appointments.
Yeah, so we're still in the phase where faculty offers are coming in and people are negotiating faculty offers, especially at research-intensive institutions. And we've seen a mix of things. Most of the offers that were discussed in the last few weeks or months have actually continued progressing all the way to through the process normally. But we also have seen a couple of instances where people have been pushed to make quicker decisions than usual because the institution was worried about a hiring freeze. And the chair of the search or of the department was trying to ask people to make a decision quickly so they could move on to the next candidate if necessary before the freezes were in place. But at a national level, the information we're seeing is that there's a mix of responses it seems like a majority of the institutions we hear about are going through some type of freeze, at least in the life sciences or in the biomedical fields. But they have different types of policies. And so there are places where it's very clear that even an offer that has been made can be rescinded right now or will be rescinded right now. And the institution has put out an official notice that that's the case. And then there are other places where it's also official that any offer that has even been discussed with the candidate, even verbally, will go through all the way to the end. So I recommend, people looking into the official policies or the official notices that have been put out by institutions that they're negotiating with, to find out where they're at and where they stand right now.
And what was the website that you were sort of looking at for the list of, or sort of people were crowdsourcing nationally, what institutions were freezing?
So the website the professor is in is actually crowdsourcing this information. We've linked to it from our website. We have a webpage about negotiating for a faculty position in current times with a couple of resources like this. So we'll link to this with this video.
So Lawrence, one other thing, have you been seeing anything about students and postdocs who are going into postdoc positions? I would assume that, that the hiring freeze actually also extends to those postdoc opportunities.
I think it's, again, a mix of information that we're seeing. We're seeing some information that some institutions are freezing the postdoctoral hires, but we're not seeing this across institutions. And I would just say yet, because I think it's still a very changing, evolving situation. So it could very well be that, most institutions slow down on the postdoctoral hires.
Okay, so basically what we're seeing is that there are in industry opportunities and the hiring process seems to still be moving forward. With internships, it seems like they are considering internships, but perhaps not lab-based opportunities. And in academe, for both postdoc and faculty positions, it seems to be industry specific, but we are sort of seeing a move towards freezing or freezing offers more so than actually rescinding them. And so let's actually talk a little bit about what advice you've all been giving your students and postdocs in one-on-one counseling appointments. So let's actually kind of do it backwards this time. So Lawrence, just for the postdocs who've come to you and have said, I'm wondering, I'm negotiating, should I still negotiate if I have an offer and I'm looking at another offer? Can you talk a little bit about sort of how faculty or how institutions seem to be making the offers, and then also talk a little bit about what you've been recommending and what we've been recommending that they do?
There's different stages of the hiring process for faculty positions, and they're quite long, and I'm going to just break them down. So in the first stage, there's often a conversation and a discussion about, we're about to make a hire, please send us a budget, kind of these early stages. Most negotiations have kind of gone through this stage already and are moving into the next stage. So I'm not as worried anymore about people being here, but if you're still in this stage of, we want to make an offer, I would really recommend making sure you communicate well with the institution, and you ask the people that you've been communicating with, whether it's the chair of the department or somebody else, whether they expect any hiring freezes, whether they expect that this offer will go through, and even maybe starting to accelerate the process a little bit. So usually we tell people to take their time and see if other offers will come through. And in this time, it's a little bit tough to have multiple offers or wait for other offers and kind of stall the negotiation on a first offer. It's if you haven't had an offer yet and it's about to come in, I would just recommend just trying to communicate with them about their timeline and trying to accelerate the process a little bit before there's any change in policy at that institution, because I think this is going to evolve as well. And then if you're in that second stage where you already have a written offer, and you also should communicate with the department and ask them if they believe this is going to go through all the way, if there's any new information. One thing I recommend for people is to really ask for the chair to let you know if there's any sign that things will change, not just, what's the policy right now. So if, tell them that this is really important for you, it's a really important decision-making process, and you really need to know ahead of time if they think there might be a change in the decisions about freezing hires, so that you have time to kind of decide between, if you have multiple offers, it's really important. It also means that the usual negotiation process, which is, asking potentially for a position for your spouse, asking for more startup, asking for other things, maybe going for a second site visit and waiting for the second site visit before you sign your offer. All of these things are kind of more up in the air now. And again, my recommendation is to try to get as more solidity as possible. And I'd really love to have people have a signed offer, and all the things that are not necessary for having a signed offer can wait. So right now in counseling, what we're discussing is, well, what would have you done in the site visit number 2? You would have visited the lab space. Are you considering not taking this position because of a certain lab space over another? No? Okay, then maybe you can actually just have that conversation with the chair and ask to get as much as you can in the letter, but really move on. And the most important part is getting that offer signed, with the hope that that will be enough not to get it rescinded. I also recommend people get really a lot of support in this time, because it's a very stressful time. So we'll talk about this later, but I think there's some counseling support that you can get from UCSF. So for the people who might be in a situation where their offer got rescinded or didn't come through, this is, I know this is a stressful time. And so I think the advice that we have here is, you can continue thinking about potentially trying to apply again next year. We don't know what the job market will be like in the fall for faculty positions, or maybe a little bit later in the year. So you can continue making plans to stay in your postdoc, and we can do a counseling appointment around this, about figuring out what are the things you need to put in place to stay longer. You'll need to check in with the Office of International Scholars to be able to look into your visa situation. There might be different things that you need to put in place, but you can also schedule an appointment with Mike or I to think about what would be your plan B in this case. Is there another career type that you're really interested in, so we can start helping you prepare for that in parallel, because you're still very competitive for positions, and you have very transferable skills.
And I think what we're sort of seeing on the postdoc side is that we haven't yet heard of anyone having a postdoc offer pulled. What I did see was on the website Academic Stacks, there was one person sort of just saying that they had an offer, and then they got told that offer was now on hold, and they were trying to get clarity about what that meant. It is very likely that if faculty just found out that that there's a hiring freeze at the institution, particularly if faculty are, or particularly if postdocs are considered to be staff at your institution, that they are still actually trying to figure out sort of what the strategy, whether or sort of where postdocs fit into that, because there are usually exceptions made for individuals who are considered essential. There might be a difference, say, if you're bringing your own money, right? And so the faculty person is probably actually trying to figure it out. And so it's a reasonable idea for you to reach out to that faculty if you know that there's a freeze, or even if you don't know that there's a freeze, and just kind of ask them sort of what their landscape looks like right now, just so you can sort of start to understand a little bit more about sort of like what they're thinking might happen.
One of the information that's interesting is that I saw that some institutions, announced a hiring freeze and put an exception on short-term lecturer positions and graduate student positions or graduate assistant positions and postdoctoral positions. And this is me interpreting what I'm seeing, but it's also because these positions are also at some institutions are temporary. And so there's a possibility that some of those postdoctoral positions might continue depending on the policies at that institution around what type of contracts do postdocs have.
Right. And so if you feel that you need help in figuring out sort of like how to even craft that email or to make that phone call, you can always sort of schedule a counseling appointment, and we can sort of talk about sort of what your unique strategy would be. And so let's now actually take a step back and sort of talk about what you, Mike, have been sharing with individuals who are thinking about industry.
Sure. So I guess my main piece of advice to those who have come to me has been cautious optimism, especially if you're looking at larger biotech or pharmaceutical companies. All of these companies still have drug pipelines going on. They're still developing drugs for cancer, for Alzheimer's, because people still have these ailments while this whole pandemic is going on. So, and I be cautious about that because there's a lot of uncertainty for how long this will go on. So with that in mind, I've been just advising to keep things as business as usual as far as interviews go, and just adapting to doing so in a virtual space like Zoom or WebEx or whatnot. And we'll put out some advice on how to prepare best for a Zoom interview or an online interview.
And a question,
so,
Mike, have you been seeing that have the interview actually been structured the same? So there's still like a job talk, you're still meeting multiple individuals, or do you have any insight about whether or not that process has changed any?
Just a little bit, just one anecdotal with actually someone that I'm actively counseling now. They have a interview tomorrow, and the structure has changed. There is no talk per se, like it's a standard procedure in the industry that when a student or postdoc goes in an interview, like an hour out of their whole day is going to be a PowerPoint presentation about one aspect of their research. And that went away, and it was just broken down to a half day with a series of one-on-ones or panel-style interviews. So I think there is a little bit of modification going on, but take that with a grain of salt because it's an N of one. I think what I would ask for people who might be out there interviewing is to let us know, like, what have you been getting interviews, and two, how have they been styled so that we can better be informed about them. And I guess the last thing I've been saying to everybody is just to keep in mind, keep watching what's going on. Like large scale crises like these are going to affect the most vulnerable first. And so we're going to see probably, and already have observed, startups and small companies not being hiring at all. And so don't expect those types of offers or inquiries to be coming through, but the big ones will probably be those that remain hiring. As was said earlier, they're still optimistic, but that by the fall, they can continue to hire.
Right. Thank you. And just as sort of as a final point around this, there's this question about, or there's this point about just acknowledging that everybody's plan about sort of what they thought they were doing is going to actually alter in some way, shape, or form. You either thought you were going on the market this year, even if you think you're going on the market next year. And so we are encouraging students and postdocs to schedule an appointment, to look at our upcoming programming, to look at our online resources, to sort of make sure that you're at the point that you sort of feel that you have another plan in place. We know that that cannot be the first thing you're doing, right? Like the first thing you're doing is just taking care of yourself, making sure that you're getting your work done. But this second part about sort of just thinking about, well, how can you understand your options and be as dynamic as possible to be ready when you do go on the market is sort of what we're thinking of, which could be things like you have both an academic and a non-academic CV handy, right? You actually sort of understand a little bit about sort of how to interview using Zoom and sort of lighting yourself well. So there are things where if you have time, and in some cases you don't, but if you have time, there are some things that you can be doing, and we will be sending out advice and information on that. Our program manager, Rachel Kerr, has been sending out information to you on our listservs. We'll have that link at the end in case you're not actually getting that email. And so are there any kind of final points or any final thoughts, guys?
So yeah, one last piece of advice. I think under normal circumstances, I would advise trainees, regardless of the path that they're pursuing, to always wait for their dream opportunity to come up. But in these cases, I would say that that's maybe not the approach to take, and to just say, to take that job that comes by your desk and go for it, and not necessarily wait for that dream job. just take what comes in these difficult times.
So I just wanted to mention that even under normal circumstances, 65% of the students who participate in gsice, graduate student internships for career exploration, get their internships through networking, through informational interviews. So I just wanted to encourage anyone who's interested in an internship to continue with that work, because worst case scenario, if you don't get an internship, you still do some great networking. And now is actually a great time to do that, because employers and people at companies are feeling very altruistic. They want to help. And in some cases, they have more time to do things like informational interviews. So don't think that there's anything wrong with spending the time that you would have done in an internship doing networking instead.
Right. Yeah, actually, that's a good point, and I think it was mirrored by the by NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is our professional association. That they were sort of saying that that reaching out to individuals who may also kind of have sort of like time, but not necessarily sort of time to do like deep thought, but maybe time to connect, that might be a good idea and a good use of your time. We will also sort of have the link to UCSF Connect, which is the networking sort of tool that we have in a conjunction with our alumni association. And also on our web page, we will also have information about sort of how to reach out, because you also are going to tailor the letter a little bit differently, just acknowledging that this is an unusual time, and maybe giving a little more leeway between the amount of time that a person needs to respond. So that's what we're seeing sort of. Oh, and one other from Lawrence. What have you got?
So I want to echo what Linda said about using this time for doing informational interviews and for connecting and networking with people also in academia. I think it's really, really vital. And I want to reiterate the fact that for those of you who have been planning for an academic career, we absolutely realize that this is really dramatic in some cases to, have come all the way there, have done all these job talks and these chalk talks and interviewing and being on the point of getting, to the point of getting a faculty job offer and maybe not having it go through. Although once again, we haven't seen this directly. I realize how stressful this is, and we want to make sure that you understand that it's okay to feel this stress right now and to feel like this is really a huge deal, and that there are resources at UCSF to support you in helping you keep being well, because this is a very long process, this faculty negotiation, and you are probably going to go back and have to go through it. So we want to encourage you to get all the support you need during this time, and to also stay hopeful that things may bounce back faster than they have in the past. For the 2008 situation, it was a very different situation that was causing the freezes, and just take the time to kind of get through this, process the change, and then start planning again and start connecting again to faculty, and then of course reach out to us to create a new plan. So that would be my advice here. The other thing that we want you to think about is that we have a survey that goes out every week, that is called a pulse survey that actually collects data from trainees about how things are going and what types of support they need at that time. So we encourage you to actually contribute to the survey and let us know. And it's a 3-question survey that Rachel Kerr sends out every week. So I just want to encourage people to participate in it, because this is how we get all the information we can from you to actually design things that will be really helpful.
To that end, our next conversation is actually based on the results that we got from our earlier pulse, which is that our next conversation is going to be about managing productivity expectations from your PI while you are managing COVID. We've just heard some information and some questions about sort of how to have conversations and what's reasonable to expect. And the unique sort of situation that we're in right now is that there is nobody who happens to have a better benchmark about what the definition of productivity is during a pandemic, right? So everything is going to sort of have to be negotiated and renegotiated. And since it's both new for you and also for your faculty person, it's just going to sort of require strategy and conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that next time. But as a final thing, I will say that to Lawrence's point, students can actually contact student health and counseling. There are counseling appointments available, and for postdocs, because you are considered faculty, you get access to counseling appointments through the Faculty Staff Assistance Program. And then once again, the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs, Liz Silva, and the Postdoc Dean, Gabby Monsalve, are always in your corner and there for you. If you just even need to sort of check in and sort of kind of say that you're just really sort of struggling with it, that's enough. And in our case as well, you don't necessarily need to come with a plan, just come and we'll talk. So that is sort of what we're seeing on the landscape, and we'll continue to keep you updated. The final thing I'll also say is that you are also sort of individuals who have your own separate communities, and so if you feel that this would be helpful to other students and postdocs who weren't able to listen to this or don't know about this, please forward it to them, as well as your friends across the country. So we will talk again soon, and take care, everyone. Bye.